Follow along today as we run through a graphic design brief and show you in real time how to become so good at the design process that you can master any project. But of course, first we actually need a brief to work with, and so let's create one in ChatGPT. ChatGPT is actually a really awesome resource for creating briefs to actually practice with, or even to help you expanding on existing briefs. Now you're soon going to see exactly why this first step in any design process is so vital and so important. And so to get a mock brief to work with so we can run through the design process in real time in today's video, let's create a marketing poster for some new stylish headphones. Now I want to make sure that we have some traits of the headphones into the brief description and also a very vague kind of target audience reference as well. Now as you can see, ChatGPT has actually generated a fictitious brand known as XYZ. It's also given us some main objectives. Now immediately I'm picking out terms like making the poster visually appealing, but also some adjectives here like sleek, modern, trendy. But if we scroll down below that, crucially there's a tiny bit about the target audience, and we're going to make some really great use of this very soon. And below that, something you won't always find on a client brief, and that is some design guidelines on palettes, fonts, and so on. Sure, yeah, it depends on your client and their tier level, but lower level tier clients won't be giving you this kind of detail as far as the guidelines in the brief go. But here you can get a feel for the kind of visual language we need to be using for this poster. I'm thinking vibrant colors, modern and sleek, trendy, clean, and lots of other details to be found right here too. This information right here is basically our key to totally smashing this brief, and it's the first step that you can take to truly master any design project and process. I can't emphasize enough how important this is. But what if you don't have this level of detail on your client brief? Well, here's the thing. You could do something like this. So in ChatGPT, paste in your brief and then ask it to create a visual language around that brief. Maybe also hint at the target audience as well. So as you can see, we now have vast detail and suggestions in terms of the color palette, font choices, imagery styles, and the juicy good stuff. I wouldn't take this as a solid rule, however. Just be sure to use your own intuition and your own style as a designer, but make sure everything you design and every choice you make relates back to the brief. Now today, I'm personally not going to use this expanded visual language suggestion. I feel like I have enough to go on from the original brief that we created earlier. Before we get started on the actual design, and yes, I know you want to get into the design process, but I want to show you what we want to avoid in terms of the kind of design we're going for. Yeah, take a look at these headphone template designs. Envato Elements is really helpful and really useful, but when it comes to templates, like pretty much any template website, things look pretty generic and pretty boring. Think back to the keywords from the brief we just looked at earlier. We have things like modern, sleek, clean, trendy, and none of these designs here evoke those attributes. So what do you say? Let's make something entirely different that blows these designs right out of the water. Now, I did say Envato Elements was useful, and that's because here I've sourced an image for our focal point. I believe this image is perfect, and here's exactly why. If we bring up the target audience section from the brief, we can see the model is young, she looks trendy and has a sense of fashion from what we can gather, and the headphones are clearly visible as well. She also looks like she's really enjoying the experience of using the headphones. Her smile is going to add to the overall vibe of the design later, and that's if my concept actually works out well. Let's see. So the very first thing I want to do is to remove the background via Photoshop's subject selection tool. Now this thing is rarely ever perfect, as I'm sure you know, so I often come back in and clean things up with the quick selection tool. And actually, this might take a minute, so I'm going to jump you forward to when it's actually finished. There. And yes, before I hear you scream, there is still pink in her hair, and that's actually going to be totally fine. You'll soon see why. But the brief mentioned vibrant colors, and I think it even hinted at gradients somewhere too. So I've sourced some nice gradients here, however, I'm not a fan of the grain effect on them. So what I can do is to flatten these gradients down, and then make use of the surface blur effect in Photoshop. So that's already looking pretty decent, but to really hit the brief in terms of the color palette, let's go ahead and whack up the saturation a tiny bit. I say tiny, it's probably going to be quite a lot. Something like this should probably hit hard. Yeah, holding down shift when rotating things and locking it to 45-degree angles is probably one of my most widely used shortcuts in Adobe. And as you can see, the pinkness in her hair, it now blends right into the design. And yes, the gradient is looking pretty decent as a background, but we don't want to be basic here today. I feel like adding some horizontal area at the bottom that's going to create some distinction and some intrigue. So using off-white, we can add a rectangle down here. I feel like also this could be a good space to add the CTA later in the process. I'm curious to see which of my two gradients works best on this composition. So I'm quickly going to blur the other one out and I'll be right back with that. So here's the other gradient, and which one do you prefer? For now, let's just keep this one because next I have maybe one of the most important aspects to making this design actually work. It's a really cool trick on workflows just like this one, and it's going to help add a clean, modern, sleek feel to the finished design. So I've added this rectangle of 50% black to the front of all layers. We will need to convert it to a smart object purely because we want to rasterize the shape afterwards. So once it's rasterized, we can then change the layer blend mode to something like overlay or even soft light. And soft light is probably going to be the best shout here, but already you can see the difference it makes just by having it there. And some of you might know exactly what we're going to do next. Yep, let's grab the dodge tool found here. And I like to use a really low exposure when using this tool, in this case just 3%. So use the dodge tool on the highlights of your design, right over that top grey layer. But yeah, I would suggest taking your time with this, and if you want to rub out what you've done, just paint over it with a colour of 50% black. So here we just really want to emphasize those highlights, and trust me, the end result is going to be stunning. It also helps to highlight focal points, and in this instance, that will be those headphones. However, we can also use the burn tool, which does the exact same thing, but with shadows instead of highlights. But like I said, take your time with this, and it will prove to be highly effective. And I do want to take my time on this, so I'll be back right after everything is said and done, so see you soon. So quickly popping back to the brief, the design guidelines stated that we should be using modern and stylish fonts that are easy to read. To me, that just simply screams modern sans serif fonts. I'm sure you'd probably agree too. But yeah, notice how soft and clean the model's skin now looks. I also used the dodge and the burn on her jacket as well. But let's add some modern typography. The new model refers to the new headphones, and I've really got to clean up this hair at some point. But anyway, for this typography, I always had in mind this typeface for this design. I'm going to pair it up with something later, but for the main typography on this specific design, I feel like this is a real winner. And I almost always run with optical here as that option. So for the pairing, I was thinking about aileron. And for now, we'll just leave it like that and add in copy text later. We can also thicken up the main heading like so. Yeah, perfecto. Of course, my brief didn't have text content available, so I'm just kind of making things up for this design. I added a white arrow too, which looks pretty trendy, but also it draws attention to the starting point of the flow in the top left. Some more copy using aileron here, and I'm going to add in some text in the smaller box later. Now, I was thinking of ways to add in some iconic, trendy, clean symbols, and I thought that 2 circles could look decent and represent 2 kind of headphones. There. I feel like this is already looking trendy, clean, vibrant, and also fun, of course. But there is one key element missing. I want to add in the XYZ logo behind the focal point. So I need it to remain trendy and clean, but not make the design overcrowded and look cheap. One surefire way to do that would be to partially hide it, much like you see on the cover of Vogue or other fashion magazines. The focal point here is of course the headphones and the model, and it needs to be the most important part of the design. So just sorting out the kerning, I want the lettering to be bunched up for the vision I have for this part of the design. So let's enlarge it and then pop it behind the focal point. Now, it doesn't matter if it's not entirely legible. This part here is just like a design asset. The logo is also going to be displayed elsewhere on the design soon. But damn, I'm feeling this a whole lot. The design is looking really fresh, really clean, and it's just, yeah, good stuff. But blend modes. I'm a huge fan of blend modes, so let's see how things look with a different approach right here. See, soft light gives a very different feel to things, I think. The design is softer and the focal point is more emphasized. But using white, things look more trendy and more modern. For now, let's just stick with soft light because I wanted to add the logo in the bottom right of the design. And this is where the viewer might finish their journey, or at least they will realize and notice it. And yeah, you can see how different things look with that dodge and burn layer turned off. Of course, we should go for black on white for the logo. And having this space at the bottom was a really good shout in my opinion. Also, lowering the opacity slightly of the dodge and burn layer sounds like a good shout too, but only slightly. I'm still torn on the background. I'm stuck between the white and the translucent. You know what? Just let me know in the comment section below which one you prefer. So I've gone ahead and finished off the other details. The CTA is directly at the bottom, and I didn't want it to overcrowd the design. For things to relate to the brief in terms of being modern, sleek, I had to keep things sort of minimal and clean. Also, if you feel like the text is too small, when printed out as a poster or magazine page, it will be legible in person. And to answer the question, how do you get so good at graphic design that you can smash any brief? Well, you never underestimate the brief, and also the subsequent visual language you make from the brief. Design with purpose, because all good graphic design has a purpose. Here, it was to evoke a sense of modernity, sleekness, and trendiness. The design needed to be visually appealing so the headphones appeared desirable and fashionable, and that would then lead to more sales. It would be very easy to overcrowd this design with tacky cliche labels or price tags and so on. That wouldn't fit the narrative, it would not fit the brief here. But if you want to learn more about the graphic design process and how to boost your graphic design skills, just click that video on screen, and until next time guys, design your future today. Peace.